One day, photography buff Michael bought an old camera from a flea market and decided to develop the film he found inside. He saw his missing son in the photographs and soon discovered something shocking. For countless years, Michael navigated the solitude of his existence, finding solace in the pursuit of vintage cameras. Often, these relics of the past harbored forgotten treasures, film rolls, or ancient SD cards holding glimpses into bygone moments. Despite the uncertainty of their contents, Michael persisted in his efforts to unearth the memories trapped within. Somehow, looking at other people's happy lives made him feel better about his own, which turned dark 2 decades ago when his 4-year-old son, Leon, disappeared forever. He had been fighting with his ex-wife, Tracy, at a local supermarket when their kid ran off and he was never found again. 6 months later, he and Tracy separated because they could never recover from the pain. He went through a challenging period for some time after until photography pulled him out of the darkness. But everything changed one day. He bought an old, used camera from a fellow around his age at the flea market and discovered that there was an undeveloped film inside. He went into the red room he had built in his house and worked on developing the images. He didn't focus on them too much while working because he enjoyed looking fully at the final product. But when they were finally ready, he couldn't believe it. "This is impossible," he said to himself. His voice was full of shock and bewilderment. He grabbed the stack of pictures, skimmed through them, and rushed to his room to find his old photo albums. They were hidden in his closet because they were tough to look at, but he needed them urgently now. He opened an album at a page that featured some of his son's last pictures and placed the newly developed photos next to them. "I'm right, but how?" he asked, looking up as if God could give him some guidance, but he looked back down and knew the truth. The new pictures featured his missing son, the one he had not seen for many years. As he flipped through the photos he had developed, he saw his growing up before his eyes. There were pictures of him at the beach. Another photo showed him on what seemed like his first day at school. The others featured Leon getting taller, playing soccer, celebrating his birthdays, and the final one was of his high school graduation. Surprisingly, the young man in the photos had graduated from Michael's alma mater in Pasadena, California, but he couldn't understand what was going on. Could this be a coincidence? Maybe this boy was just Leon's doppelganger. But if the boy was Leon, he appeared to have lived a beautiful life. Somehow, that thought eased Michael's mind. It gave him peace to think that his son was never scared or in pain, no matter what happened. But soon enough, thoughts of discovering the truth crept into his mind, and he couldn't let them go. He went to the flea market the following day, but the man who sold him the camera was nowhere to be found. He tried for a few days and nothing. His next option was to go to his alma mater and ask around. Luckily, the principal's secretary still remembered him. "Michael dear, how are you? Mrs. Marley, you're still working here. Why haven't you retired?" Michael greeted her with a smile, and they chit-chatted some more about life before he got down to business. He asked her about a boy named Leon Collins, and Mrs. Marley shook her head. "I'm sorry. I don't recall that name, and you know I make it a point to know all my students," she answered, frowning at Michael. "Ah, but do you remember this boy?" he asked, pulling the graduation photo from his pocket, and Mrs. Marley recognized him immediately. "Of course. He was our star soccer player, but his name was Samuel Day," the older woman revealed, making Michael frown. He asked more about Samuel and wondered if she had his old address, but Mrs. Marley didn't want to reveal that information. When Michael confessed his suspicions about what happened to his little boy, she relented and went through the school records. "I assume Samuel is at college, but this was his parents' address while he was here. I hope you find what you're looking for, Michael," she sympathized. Michael thanked her and drove directly to the address on the piece of paper she gave him, hoping someone would be there. He rang the doorbell with a shaking hand as nervousness coursed through his system. He tried to shake it off, but nothing could have prepared him for the person who answered the door. "Tracy," he said, his jaw wide and his eyes confused. "Michael, what are you doing here?" she asked, opening the door wider and crossing her arms. Michael couldn't respond for a few seconds. He was frozen. He didn't know what to think or to feel. Then he finally spoke up. "Where is my son?" he demanded, his shock turning to anger, although he tried to tone it down. Tracy uncrossed her arms, breathed a deep sigh, and exited her house, closing the door behind her. "Michael, Leon was never your son," she revealed, acting nonchalantly, although he was breaking his heart on the spot. I was dating someone else while I was with you, and he disappeared when I told him I was pregnant, so I didn't have a choice. I told you Leon was your son because I didn't want to raise him alone." "No, you're lying," Michael breathed. "I don't know how you found out or why you're here," Tracy started. "But I have a DNA test to prove it. His father came back and wanted to be in his life. I fell for him again, and we didn't know what to do, so we came up with a plan. We lied to you, and we moved on." That's... He stuttered, angry tears falling from the corners of his eyes. "Despicable, I guess. But I don't regret it," she replied, shrugging her shoulders. "You could have told me the truth so I wouldn't have suffered or mourned my kid for almost 2 decades, Tracy. Jesus, how could you? It doesn't really matter now. Samuel doesn't remember you at all. My husband is his father, and you can't do anything about it. If you come here again, I'll file a police report and get you arrested," she threatened, getting angry herself. "I'm on his birth certificate. We changed that 2 years ago. There's nothing you can do. Now, go away and never try to approach my Sam," Tracy insisted, her face twisted in disdain. She opened her door and went back inside. Michael sat in his car, consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. His frustration boiled over as he pounded the steering wheel, tugged at his hair, and tears streamed down his cheeks. An hour slipped by before he managed to steady his breathing and reluctantly ignited the engine. During the journey home, thoughts swirled in his mind, calling the police, seeking legal advice, anything to reclaim his son. Upon reaching his room, he encountered the scattered remnants of his life strewn across the floor in the form of photographs. In that moment, a sobering realization washed over him. Leon had found happiness, seemingly untouched by memories of Michael. Pursuing legal action would only cast him as the antagonist in his son's narrative, a thought that pierced Michael's heart. Night after night and day after day, he grappled with his anguish, tears serving as silent witnesses to his pain. Though he never fully healed from Tracy's betrayal, he resolved to press forward, clinging to the faint hope of eventual peace.